Hello everyone, Kanasa here, and welcome to Kerbal Gets Real, The Next Millenia, an RP-1 series with a twist, in the fact we are starting in the year 2000 rather than the 1950s. I have already done a bog standard RP-1 career on this channel with Kerbal Gets Real. If you haven't seen that, I will put a card to that now. It is a precursor to this series, however, you don't have to have watched it to get a grasp of what we are going to be performing in this series. This is usually where I would say, well, this is going to be the first launch of the series. It is not. I have already done a couple, one in episode 0, and we also performed one on the live stream where I developed the Orpheus 9, a reusable launch vehicle very similar to the SpaceX Falcon 9. And the launch vehicle that is on screen at the moment is a variant of the Orpheus series of launch vehicles. It is the Orpheus Small, reason being it is smaller than the Orpheus 9. It only has 3 Merlin 1D engines on its first stage, and rather than an RL23P on its upper stage, we are using 2 RL10s. Now, we are going to be attempting to recover our first stage booster. This was easier said than done due to the fact that I was running into a few bugs with the game. I was trying to activate my engines and throttle them up. However, when the engines were active, they were unable to be controlled at all. This was rather bizarre. I had communications, I had avionics, and I did have ignitions left on those engines. Luckily, it did decide to work at some points, and I was able to perform a burn to slow us down and to point us retrograde so that when we do start descending, well, we aren't going to be torn apart by aerodynamic forces. I am incredibly sorry that we are going to be coming down in the pitch black. It is unfortunate that this is how this launch went, but we are going to deploy those landing gear. We are going to fire up that Merlin 1D and we're going to hit the ground at almost 75 meters per second. I am so shocked that we managed to stick that landing. I would have thought going at those kind of speeds, well, we would have been toast, but no. We are going to have to observe that booster in our vehicle assembly building and make sure that it is fit to fly again. Something that I did mention on the live stream, people wanted me to use Kerbal Construction Time to recover those boosters, and I can fly them again and again and again. Unfortunately, that is not going to be able to be done in this series purely because of the way Flight Manager for Recoverable Stages, which is the mod that I'm using for my recovery, works. I can attempt to recover to the VAB using Kerbal Construction Time, but it doesn't seem to want to do that, and it gets overridden by Flight Manager. Bit of a shame, but I will have to keep a tally in my head how many successful launches of each booster we have had. Anyway, enough about the boosters. What is this mission? What is this mission? What are we going to be doing? This is going to be a satellite that we place into a polar orbit, and I want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We have yet to complete our first artificial satellite contract, so there is that. And we also have a whole load of ScanSat parts on this, which will produce some lovely, beautiful, detailed maps of the Earth, which is going to be really helpful for me in picking out my next holiday destination. No, we do also have a load of ScanSat contracts, and that is going to give us a nice boost in funding. When I developed the launch vehicles, I did spend an awful lot on those, and, well, yes, the funding situation was looking a bit bleak, so we needed to get a way of earning some money somehow. So now we are going to be turning to our friends at the European Space Agency, and we are going to be launching from Kourou on the 26th of August 2000. This is going to be LOST 1, which is the Lunar Observational Space Telescope. And basically, all this is going to be my transfer window planner. I needed to launch something into the alignment of the moon, because that's how I like to do my transfer window planners, but I wanted this to have a little bit more of a purpose rather than just being some random piece of space junk that I keep in that orbit. So we do have a camera on this spacecraft. It is that rather large white thing in front of the payload adapter, and I thought, yeah, if we're going to be in alignment with the moon, well, we should be seeing that celestial body quite frequently. So we can point our camera at there and we can take some lovely photographs. In terms of the game, this isn't going to be able to do anything. It will gain us 10,000 science over the next 20 years. I know, it's a ridiculous amount of science. But I don't need science. I have completed the tech tree in this save, so it's kind of redundant. Well, it's not completely redundant in the fact that every time I gain 20 science, that will give me a new upgrade point for Kerbal Construction Time. Obviously, that is going to help produce rockets much faster in the long run, especially when we start getting oodles of science from a lot of different experiments that we will be running, and that will really help when we have very busy transfer windows later on in this series, which I imagine we will do, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff happening around, maybe some certain Mars or Venus transfer windows that we might want to be sending a lot to those two planets. Anyway, we have finally got ourselves to orbit, and now it is time to select every single planet that I can find, grab MechJeb's advanced transfer to another planet function, and we are just going to add loads of these to our Kerbal alarm clock. That way I know exactly when the transfer windows are going to be. I know there is a transfer window mod, but this is just the way I like doing this. I have found with RSS and RO, this is the most reliable way of getting a good transfer window. It's worked for me since I've started playing it, and it's just how I like doing it, I guess. There we go. We are all done. We have transfer windows. So now we are going to be returning to New Horizons Space Agency's main launch complex Orwell at Norfolk in the UK. I have decided to name my UK launch sites after famous authors. If you've got any recommendations for more launch sites, why not leave them in the comments? Over in Kourou, we are going to be naming the launch sites after famous directors, and at Tanegashima in Japan, that will be named after famous composers. This mission is going to be the first mission in this series launched on top of an Orpheus 9, the big brother to the Orpheus Small that we did launch earlier on in this episode. And I'd like to take a moment now just to talk a little bit about how I'm going to run this series. I want to do this a bit more cinematic than I did Kerbal Gets Real, as you may be able to tell from the shots that I have already done in this episode. However, I am going to be the first to admit I am definitely not the best at doing cinematic KSP, and if you want to go and discover some channels that you don't already know about that do absolutely fantastic cinematics, I would highly recommend both Calvin McClure and Felix Yu. I will put a link to both of their channels in the description of this video. Really do go check them out. They both produce absolutely amazing content. After that bit of a plug of my fellow RP-1 YouTubers, what we are going to be attempting to do is landing this Orpheus 9 booster. Once again, I was having a problem with the engines actually firing up, but luckily I was able to activate those two. I tried to get MechJeb to do a slowdown burn. Even MechJeb was unable to overcome the issue that I was having here. If anyone has experienced this issue, please let me know, because it is really frustrating and I would like this to work, and I can imagine this is going to cause a lot of upset when inevitably it causes me to lose a booster because the game has just decided to say, no, you are not going to be firing up your engines today. Here we are coming over the south of France now though, and I do like to imagine that we do have a dedicated landing site for these rather than landing on some poor person's house. I can't imagine they'd be particularly happy if we landed a 50-ton booster on their chateau. But we are now coming to the last moments of this booster's flight. The landing gear have been deployed and we are going to fire up that Central Merlin 1D engine for the final time and manage to touch down rather nicely at about 3 meters per second. So one reason why I want to use the UK as the main launch site for all of my reusable launches is if I launch into a polar inclination, then I'm always going to be able to land in France. If I launch due east, then I will be able to land in Germany. It makes it a lot more stable for my game rather than having a dedicated drone ship such as, of course, I Still Love You. It's going to make it a lot easier rather than, launching from, say, the Cape and doing boost back burns all the time, or having a drone ship somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. It makes this a lot more, well, bearable to do, if I'm going to be particularly honest. I do want to eventually use Kerbal operating system to maybe try and target my landings pinpoint every single time. I do need to look into using it a bit more. I have barely scratched the surface with that yet. I know there are scripts that you can download online that should be able to do some of that stuff for you, but I do want to go in and I do want to create my own. Anyway, the purpose of this satellite was to get some high resolution visual imagery of the Earth. I couldn't find originally the part that did that for you, but it turns out it was this rather chunky camera piece that was the part that I was indeed looking for. But we were successful in that mission. So what we're going to do now is, on the 7th of November 2000, we are going to be launching one of those cameras to the moon, so we can get some nice high-resolution imagery of the moon as well. This time, this is going to be functional, and it should hopefully look rather nice once it has all been done. We are going to be using yet again the Orpheus 9 for this mission because it is the largest launch vehicle that I have in my fleet at the moment, and sending this camera over to the moon is going to require a lot. So much so that we actually expended the entire fuel in the Orpheus 9's first stage. Rather than saving a little bit to perform a landing, we did completely expend that booster. I want to try and avoid doing this as much as possible, and I think when I develop larger launch vehicles that are more capable of getting some larger stuff over to the moon, I will try and avoid doing that at all. But for now, we did need that little bit of extra delta V to get us over to the moon. This is me now trying to figure out my maneuver on how we are going to get over there. So I am launching these into a polar inclination. That way I don't have to make any drastic inclination changes. However, it does mean I have to launch at the perfect time of day, which is something that I do need a bit more practice with, because I did have to wait in orbit to get that encounter for a few days. I do have multi-layer insulation on my Hydrolock stage, on the Unicorn stage, so we didn't really suffer any boil off, but it is something that I should really get better at doing. I would like to say that this mission was a complete success. Unfortunately, it was not. We had to use a bit of that Unicorn transfer stage to achieve our orbit because this payload was incredibly heavy. It came in at 32 tons all in, and the Orpheus 9 is only capable of lifting around 26. Despite that, I still did have enough delta V to achieve a lunar orbit. However, the thrusters on this camera stage were really weak. We had a thruster-weight ratio of 0.03, which meant that I had to do multiple burns to try and reach the moon. And unfortunately, that meant that, well, I missed my target by quite a considerable margin. And yeah, I really wasn't having the best of times actually performing this burn. I really scuffed it up, basically, is what happened. If I could have used the Unicorn transfer stage to perform the entirety of the translunar injection, this might have been a different story. Unfortunately, that was not to be. And rather than keeping this in orbit, I thought, yeah, let's cause a firework and let's blow this up. So going back to the drawing board and making some slight modifications to the L-cam, we are going to be attempting to launch this again. Basically what I have done is I have removed all of the fuel from the camera stage, and we are going to be completely reliant on the Unicorn transfer stage to get us over to the moon and then to capture when we are there. We have more than enough delta V to do that, and it does mean we can fit that nice and snugly inside an Orpheus 9 and be able to get to orbit without having to worry about using any of that Unicorn stage. However, yet again, things weren't going to go according to plan. MechJeb decided we were going to be having some kind of computational issues, so when I was using ascent guidance, before we even hit 1,000 meters, we decided to pitch over rather sharply, causing us to, well, you can see what's about to happen. The aerodynamic stresses were far too much for this spacecraft, and we suffered our first rapid unplanned disassembly in this series. Like I said, this payload is completely cursed. We lost everything from the rocket. Nothing did survive. Oh well, I'll have to go on to L-cam number 3. After being thoroughly assessed for a couple of months, the computational issues that were arising in the Orpheus 9 series of rockets seem to have mostly been fixed. So we are going to be launching another lunar cam. Hopefully this time we can actually make it all the way over to the moon. I mean, we got to orbit once and didn't get quite that far, and then we also just blew up, which was rather disappointing. So, one thing that I do want to do in this series, before I start doing human spaceflight, obviously I probably could go into human spaceflight as is. I want to play it safe. And I kind of want to go along the route where I'm going to test abort systems I'm going to make sure that the rockets that I use to get humans to space are going to be comfortable for humans to get to space, and they are also going to have been tried and tested quite a few times. And in that regard, I do imagine the Orpheus 9 will be a launch vehicle that will be able to lift humans. However, in order for that to tick all of the boxes that I kind of want to apply in my head, I want to have launched an Orpheus 9 at least 10 times successfully. I'm not sure if I want to have 10 consecutive launches or if I just want to go for 10 successful launches just as is. I'm not sure what I have decided upon yet. I think 10 consecutive successful launches might be the better way to go, and then that way we can be sure, we know exactly that these launch vehicles do work as advertised and that there shouldn't really be any risk in putting humans on top of one of those giant death sticks. I do think it will be a rather cool idea though to include in this series pad abort tests and flight abort tests, just so that we know the hardware that we will be using in this series has been tried and tested and proven to work. So we are now finally burning for the moon with the lunar cam. We have got into orbit successfully and we are on our way to the moon, and we don't have to worry about performing multiple burns this time. No, we should be able to do it in just the one solitary burn using that unicorn transfer stage, of course powered by an RL10 engine. And there we go, we can see we do indeed have an encounter, and even better, it is looking like it is going to be fairly polar from our translunar injection, which is obviously nice because this needs to be polar in order to get that high resolution visual imaging scan that this mission has been designed for. But there we go, the first time we have encountered the moon in the next millennia. I mean, if you caught the live stream where I designed the Orpheus, we did send a mission to the moon already, but this is the first time we've got there in an actual video. And you can see I've got my scan planetary mapping up, and we can see we are actually performing that high resolution imagery that we do want, and we should get some lovely pictures of the moon. This will also scan for anomalies, but as far as I'm aware, there aren't any on the moon. At least after I had completed the full scan, there weren't any apparent, so we're not going to be able to go and visit any monoliths in the moon in this series, unfortunately. I do know there are some anomalies on some of the other planets in the solar system, so that might be something cool that we could potentially go and visit at some point. That now, however, is the end of LCAM 3's mission. I am going to leave this in a lunar orbit though, just so it can act as a communications relay for further missions. Talking of communications though, I did kind of forget that I was playing RP-1 for a moment then, and the 3 missions that I just attempted to send to the moon weren't going to fulfill any contracts in the slightest, so we are going to be launching the Marconi Communications Test Satellite. This has the ability to complete 4 contracts all in one launch, which is going to be fabulous, and it is so called the Marconi Satellite because at least 2 Wikipedia articles and a note I found scrawled on the back of a coffee cup did claim that Marconi was the inventor of radio, and apparently he did this in a town not too far from where I'm from, a town called Chelmsford, and if you go there, there are signs everywhere, plastered all over the place, saying Chelmsford, birthplace of radio, and I thought it's close to where I'm from. I thought it would be nice. It's radio, it's kind of related to communications, yeah, that was just my reasoning behind it, really. Anyway, this is, as I said, going to be able to perform 4 contracts in one. That is going to be our first navigational satellite, our first communication satellite, first sun synchronous orbit, and finally our first atmospheric analysis satellite. We do have everything on this craft that we do need to be able to perform those. This was a little bit of a weird issue that I was having with Flight Manager for recoverable stages. Yeah, the second stage decided to smash into our first stage booster when we separated, when we went back to this craft. A little bit bizarre, but that didn't affect the second stage in any way, just because we'd already technically performed that second stage burn that we wanted to. And once again, I was having this weird, strange, bizarre bug that meant that I couldn't fire up my engines, and it meant that I ended up crashing into the sea. Really not ideal. Okay, so we are back with the satellite yet again. And what we are going to be able to do once we have completed those 4 contracts is we're going to unlock contracts to go and visit the moon. So the next time I do go over to the lunar environment, we're going to get money from it, which is going to be awesome. We're not going to have to rely on doing these rather naff satellite contracts that I have to do just in order to unlock those contracts. But we are going to make our way into the required orbit. We are going to go quite high for this, just so I know I can complete all of those. And we are going to get a fair bit of money from this, but it's more the fact that we unlock the lunar contracts that I'm doing this. There we go. First one has been done. There goes the second one, gone nice and green. Any minute now, we should achieve the third one. Are we going to? There we go. The countdown has started, so it's gone green. Fabulous. And we have also finished that 4th and final one, meaning we can finally go to the moon for profit. And to the moon for profit we will certainly go. On the 11th of June 2001, we are going to be launching our Marconi Lunar Relay. And this is going to be useful in 2 regards. We are going to pick up the Lunar Orbital contracts and Lunar Flyby contracts and a Lunar Impactor contract all in one go. Yes, very exciting, I know. And we are also going to be setting up a Lunar Relay Network, if the name of this mission didn't give it away, which I can imagine it did, considering it was called the Marconi Lunar Relay Network. I mean, that is pretty much self-explanatory. Once again, we are going to be launching this on top of an Orpheus 9. Although we are going to the moon, we are going to attempt to recover the booster this time. The relay network we do have on top of this rocket is a lot lighter than the camera that we sent over there previously. I think all in this only weighs about 3 tons, the actual payload, whereas the camera, as I mentioned before, weighed about 6 to 7 tons. So we are going to attempt to recover that booster because reusability, I've said it before in this episode, it is going to be a key component for this series. We want to try and reuse as much as we possibly can. But there we have our first stage booster separation, and the Marconi relay is on its way to space. Or is it? Yes. Well, we seem to be doing a bit of a weird flip maneuver. Basically, when I designed this mission in the vehicle assembly building, I incorrectly set my route part, which caused us to flip out. However, assigning the avionics on top of the spacecraft, on top of the rocket, meant that it was able to correctly orient itself, and MechJeb ascent guidance was fine to complete its ascent to our low Earth orbit. All rather fantastic. So we are going to return to the booster and we are going to attempt to land this in the south of France yet again. Unfortunately for me, I forgot to lock the tanks, so we did expend all of our fuel. We were unable to correct our orientation, and of course we didn't have any fuel left to land it, so we had our second rapid unplanned disassembly of this series over France. We probably are going to have to send some sort of apology to France because we just absolutely littered their beautiful countryside with parts of rocket. I don't know, probably most of it will have broken up by re-entry heating by that point, but I imagine some parts will have got through, so I am terribly sorry for that. The New Horizons Space Agency is going to send out a lot of bouquets of flowers and gift baskets to anyone that may have been in the vicinity of that booster coming down, because we do want all of the good publicity. We don't want bad publicity with boosters just, yeah, coming down willy-nilly all over the place. Anyway, enough of that. We are on our way to the moon, and we are going to be setting up a lunar relay network. And I feel like this is a good time to talk what I want to do for the first outsourcing contract. And that is going to be a lunar rover that I want to put down on the lunar South Pole. I will talk more about it in the Discord, and I will give a few more instructions in the Discord, but essentially what I want to do is a cross between Chang'e 5, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, and Perseverance. I want to send an initial rover that is going to drive around and collect samples and then just dump them all over the surface of the moon. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to design another rover that is going to go to the moon. It is going to collect those samples, and then it is going to load them up on a return vehicle, which will then send those samples back to Earth. So it's a bit like Perseverance in the fact that it is collecting samples for another craft, and a bit like Chang'e 5 in the fact that it is a lunar sample return mission. But whilst I was talking about that, we did set up our relay network and everything went according to plan. We now have communications around the moon. And that was actually the last launch of this episode. And like I said, we do have a lunar impactor mission, so I thought I would show this whilst I do my little bit of an outro. And I do just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to my channel. I did just hit 3,000 subscribers this week, which has been awesome. Thank you everyone so much who has already subscribed, and if you haven't, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button so you can keep up to date with all of the content that I will be releasing. I am just starting a brand new RO RSS series, which hopefully there will be lots of exciting things to come. And obviously they will come in future episodes. I mean, I've already laid out my plans for the moon rover and what hopefully we should be doing with that. That will definitely be coming along hopefully shortly, hopefully in the next episode that I release. But that has been the end of this episode. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, why not give it a like? And once again, if you've really enjoyed it, why not consider subscribing? I have been Karnasa, and I will see you later.